Değerli katılımcılarımız, şimdi artık yavaştan keynote konuşmacılarımıza başlıyoruz. Şimdi sıradaki keynote konuşmacımızı, ilk keynote konuşmacımızı anons edeceğim. Futurize firmasından Katie Wang geliyor olacak. I would like to introduce Katie Wang from Futurize. She works as senior consultant for Futurize. Today she will be discussing better services through business design. Everyone, please welcome Katie. Welcome.
Thank you. Pretty cool. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Hi. I'm going to start my timer so I can tell how long I've been talking. Good morning. Thank you for having me in Istanbul. Really lovely place, really lovely country, very lovely crowd. I'm going to take a picture of you guys. Say hi. So thank you for coming first thing in the morning. I wanted to know, just a show of hands before I start, I want to know what you guys do. How many people here are UX designers? Great. How many people here work in a startup? How many people here do something like let's say a business kind of role, a product owner, product manager type of thing? Developers? So who hasn't raised your hand yet? Okay, I don't want to know what you do, but anybody else? Do you have anything interesting? Any architect or something like that? No? Okay, good. Because I'm going to post on Quote Out, and it's by an architect later. I just want to make sure. So hi, I'm Kathy. Today I'm going to teach you about business thinking. So this is a famous graph by Tim Brown. And on one side, you see business thinking, and on the other side, you see design thinking. And a lot of times, this is kind of the old way and the new way of doing it. And the business thinking is that you have multiple problems, and you think that you're going to solve all of them in one go, in one solution. But the design thinking way is that you kind of narrow it down of finding a problem that is actually worth solving, and then you solve them in different chunks. You can never solve everything in one go. Tim Brown, very nice book as well. So today I'm going to teach you about how to apply design thinking to business. I'm not going to tell you how to do financial modeling. I'm not going to teach you how to use Excel. Because that's not very interesting. My name is Kathy. You can tweet me at Kathy Cracks. I'm born in Taiwan. I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. I've been living in Europe for the last 10 years. I've been working for different agencies, doing enterprise consulting on digital transformation for most of my career. I started out as an interaction designer. I was trained in interaction design, actually. So I've worked for agencies like Fjord and Frog and all over Europe, and I used to live in the Middle East as well. And throughout all the journey of being a designer, I have always kind of felt a need to ask more questions. It's kind of like a way that I never feel satisfied enough that when I ask why are we doing this, then it's like, well, this is better for the user. But I thought it was always more because we're always kind of digging more. We're supposed to understand the bigger context. So that's where my career kind of went, and then to kind of understand how everything tied together and then toward the more business side. Now I work for a company called Futurize, which is actually a Finnish company. It's been voted the best place to work in Europe in 2012 and 13. We have about 350 people, and we do from service design to development, so to bring everything into life. But what I do there is very specific. So I do business design and transformation. So one part is to use my past experience consulting for large corporations on digital transformation projects. And on the other part is to work with startups and to build up different startups and their product, and then to develop new venture models to work with startups. And I see them kind of go hand in hand. This is the quote by the architect. Always design a thing by considering it in its larger context. A chair in a room in a house in an environment in a city plan. Like I said before, there's a lot of things to consider, and it's quite important that we look at the bigger context. It's not just about what you're designing, it's not about the screen that you're designing, it goes bigger and wider. I think that we basically are design thinkers. We are design thinkers, and we treat businesses the way designers would treat your users. Design thinking is something that can be applied to anything. But if we talk about design thinking, I would like to talk about, if we really break it down, and maybe there's a framework, there's a process, and there's a rationale behind everything. If we're thinking about painting a picture or apply design thinking, it doesn't really matter what kind of picture you're painting. You're painting a portrait, you're painting a landscape, it doesn't really matter. You're painting because you have a different set of things that you need to do. There's the frame, which is the context. There's the canvas, which is the project that you're working on. And then there's the brush, which is the tool. And this goes, beyond, whatever you're designing. It really is, this is how you would do everything, I suppose, the design thinking part. And there's also the design process. Regardless what we're designing, you're a visual designer, even when you're doing visual design, you have to understand why you're doing it, what you're doing, and then you actually execute it, and then you iterate. However the cycle loops around, that this is how it goes on. And at the very end, we always ask why, because we have to validate our design rationale. After we have actually done the design, we validate it. So we always ask why. So we are faced with design decisions every day. And we are applying that kind of design thinking in everything we do, when you do your everyday job in user experience design. Does anybody want to tell me which one's better? I don't really know. So I don't think there's actually a way of telling which one is better. I think that it's this is the kind of thing about the design thinking. You have to kind of test it out. So design thinking can be applied to so many levels of everyday level what we do. But if we look at the spectrum of design, we go from visual design, UX design, service design, business design, and at the very end, there's management consulting. I know some people wouldn't call that design, but in some agencies, strategy and very strict kind of management consulting is beginning to become an offering. And I think business design sits in a very nice place where that it can be kind of a good marriage between design thinking and what business actually means. And maybe I'll give you a little example of what I mean by business design. So this is a project that was done by Futurists, and it's for Helsinki Energy, which is the third biggest energy provider in Finland, in all of Finland. So for years, they have been saying, I would really like to, build our business in a different way instead of keep burning coal. But nobody will actually buy green energy because it's so much more expensive. But it sounds reasonable for an energy company, very, very old energy company. So Futurists went in and then that talked to them, and then they did a little test. So they basically did a series of marketing campaign. So the marketing campaign of asking their users and asking existing user and also just general public about what they think about the green energy offering. A bucket full of petrol, a month of solar power. And it turns out it actually worked very well. There were a lot of really positive feedback, so positive that the feedback went back into the organization. But as a big organization goes, it might not be enough to convince them. It's well, yeah, you did some research, you tested out the market. It's is it really enough? It's well, okay. So there was a website. So this is how we prototyped a business. What happened is that a website was set up to say that this is all the solar panel that you can purchase. Each person gets one. And it's open to existing customers only. And you have to pay a deposit, a down payment for switching your original energy into the greener energy. And within a week, all of the solar panels sold out. And basically there's enough customer who have already put commitment in to say that they're willing to switch to the green energy for them to actually build a solar power plant. So they sold a solar power plant before they actually build it. So now they have enough evidence of how they can prototype this business and this business model. And they went ahead and built a solar power plant in Finland. I don't know technically how that works, but apparently it works very well. But so this is a very good example of business design, of that, how you kind of frame the business problem, and then that you can even prototype a business. So we'll come back to the service part. So what do you think is a good service? Does anybody want to jump in? No? There's no wrong answer. There's never a wrong answer. No? Okay. Well, what defines as a good service for me, I think it means that it's meaningful. I would like to think that a meaningful service is a good service because everything we do is about creating meaning as designers. But meaningful is kind of a vague word. I think maybe there are a lot of other words that will go around it to say what meaningful means. And I think that from a very user point of view, we would like to say, well, it's very useful, it's sensible, it's enjoyable, all these nice things that that's good for users. But a lot of this maybe that are things that we don't usually consider. Like, is it actually feasible? How scalable is it? How profitable is it? Because would you actually build a service that drains the revenue of a company just because it's really nice? But that's not a good service, I don't think. Like, if there is a very beautiful solution that doesn't actually allow the business that is holding it to be able to operate it, I don't think that's a good service. And we're talking about service that from digital service to physical service to anything. I don't think that it should be limited to just what the user is about. So if we think about businesses and on a scale, I think this is a very simple scale. There are only 2 dots. So I think in the very beginning, how a business forms is a startup. That you're basically putting a business together, what the business is about, and putting all the product and all the operation together. And then at the very end, you have corporations. Today, I'm going to walk through an example, a case study that I did as a project about building a startup. I'm not going to teach you how to do lean startup. I think that it's more about looking at a startup as a business, and then I'm using an example to say how to build up business design concepts. So a client came to us, a futurist, and client was quite, they're in their 40s, and they kind of have made some money in investment banking, and he really had a passion. He said that, I want to build an app for people to put all their memories or some sort at one place, so then about the music events that they go to, because I think it's really great. I'm like, okay, sounds like a client brief, right? And we ended up designing it, of course, but it's like when a client comes to you with something like this, like, what do you really say and how do you actually approach it? It's not really a good brief, and I'm specifically saying it in a way that I have because I think that is the best way I would actually describe it. And the client also, they have a business put together, they have some money put together, but none of them have digital background, and none of them have a digital product background. So for the people who work in startups, you probably would think that, well, this might not be a good idea for a startup. Well, I believe that everybody gets a go and everybody gets a chance to do what they want to do. It's good that they want a fighting chance, and it's okay. So what really needs to happen is to help them get to where they need to be, not just from the product point of view for everything. So the client, 4 or 5 of them, none of them with digital experience. So we say, okay, we can help you build a startup. So basically we ask ourselves, how should we design it? What are the different driving forces behind the MVP and the roadmap? Why are we designing this service? And how is the startup going to sustain itself? So these are quite basic questions, really. And I think that as designers, maybe, how should we design it is something that we know instinctively how to answer. And if you're a product owner, you probably would know much better how do you actually plan your MVP and plan your roadmap. But there's a lot of things coming together. And we want to, and we need to answer these questions in order to go forward. Because this is not a project for Disney where you just design very nice things and then there's a lot of designers, endless budget. This is a business that we're talking about. These people have very limited amount of time, resources, and then we need to do it right. So what do we end up doing? So we started asking questions, and I think that for designing anything, we always ask, why are we doing this? So I asked the client, why are we doing this? At some point, the team, when I talked to the team said, well, the client asked us to. That's not the right answer. You never say that the client asked us to. Sometimes it's like at the beginning of the ideation, maybe a younger designer would say, well, the client said that this is a feature that they really wanted. That's not really a good reason to develop a feature, really. At some point, I asked the client, why are they doing this? And the client told me, I want to meet Bruce Springsteen. I'm okay. I can build you an app that is tailored to Bruce Springsteen, and maybe you will get to meet him. That might be a better path than building a startup that is going to take the next 4 years of your life. So, okay, that's fine. And sometimes when we put on our kind of more business hat, to me, really, I think that it's important, especially for a startup, that I want to build a business that can grow into something. This is very vague. What does grow mean? What does something mean? I don't know. But this is something that I think it's a nice vision to go forward. And when we finally put on our product hat, so we want to enable users to capture, collect, and share personal moments, reliving those memories from different events in life. So that's just kind of like a tagline statement. So basically, I think this is how the client would describe it and how I would describe it now, is that we needed to build a service that is about putting the memories, rather it's picture or video, in one place, and then have a way of storytelling around that. That's really the product. And that's based on music and then people, user-generated content. So there was our brief, sort of, that we had to figure out how to do that. But when we are asking all these questions about why are we doing this, it's sort of like the product development strategy. I'm not a product owner, I'm not a product manager, but I do similar things from time to time. But I think the why are we doing this is quite important, because it becomes a statement that should be able to drive us through the design process, regardless what discipline that we are in. So this is the kind of overall strategy that we kind of decided on. This is quite a long conclusion, and then I'm going to go through the detail of how we got to this one sentence. It's quite complicated, but we wanted to grow the user base for a year before monetization is turned on. This is quite a short-term goal, but it gives us kind of an understanding of where we're going and how we're doing this. And with that kind of statement, when you say, why are we doing this, that you can have a counter question to say, does that actually help to grow the user base? It gives meaning and context to things that you're doing, that you actually have a reason of why you're going forward. That is something that can be measured and is something that you can push forward in a certain direction. So, a couple different steps. First, evaluate the market and the context. You know, in a design exercise that we usually kind of look at who are the competitors, what are the different features they're doing, what is the market like, what are the different people doing in the different parts of the world. We do that. We also do the business part. What is the size of the market? What's the size of the served market, the served market growth rate, and the target market? So yes, I worked a lot in Excel. I had a very, very big Excel file. So basically what I looked at is basically you have to do a lot of data crunching of I'm looking at live music audience from 4 years back. And then that based on the 4 years back, I can calculate the growth rate. And then based on that with an assumption to understand what is the served market within that specific set of audience. And based on that specific set of audience, what is the actual age group within that is based on the age group that we're targeting. And then that's my target market. And all the other numbers apply. And then we also look at how the users will behave. And this is something that, you know, from user experience that we often try to guess. And then that we also try to do research. So we know that the key audience that we're targeting is 18 to 25-year-old. And then these are the description that we would use to describe them. And we can design specific personas around this, and then to know that how they might behave, and then that to the kind of things that they value. So this is like the user experience side of it. And then there's the business side of the same thing. How will the users behave? I'm going to start with a set of users. I'm going to start a number of users. I have to know amount of active users. I have to know how many users will drop out. I have to do a projection into the future of 4 years to know how many users there will be. And I need to know the engagement rate. I need to understand what are the different factors and what is the ratio between buying users, as in marketing users, and then that, you know, organic user, and how do you measure that? So this is another thing that have to be considered about how the users will behave in numbers. And we discover the value proposition. And usually, this is like going to the little more service design part of it. It's that we follow the whole user journey through the service that is not just on the digital service that we were building. We try to understand the whole cycle of how people attend music event, and then where are the opportunity areas of different things that need to happen, from finding out there's an event to engagement, and then that they will actually go ahead and buy the ticket, and then that during the event, what would they do, after the event, what would they do, like all the different journey that's leading up to using the service itself. There are many, many opportunities. And when you do service design, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You're really trying to discover what is the most value that you can provide and where you're providing the value. So on the same note, on the business part, I think that providing value is basically revenue for me. What I had to do was to kind of have different hypotheses of different revenues of, let's say, how much is a ticket, how much are people willing to pay for merchandise, how much are people willing to pay for a subscription service. But people are not going to pay for things unless they're getting value out of it. So I have to be very clear on what is the value that's being provided. Otherwise, they're not going to pay for it. You only pay for value. So based on that kind of discovery, We build up different revenue streams. I think we have 5 or 6 different ones. And then also, at the same time, develop a very complex value chain between end users and musicians, and then developing a secondary market where musicians are actually someone that we target, that we also make money out of. So I know it might sound a little uncomfortable because I keep talking about making money and then I talk about revenue, but we are talking about business design and this is one part of it. Don't be too scared of the Excel. I'm not gonna show you more Excel files. But this is quite interesting. And then one last one is how to make it run. So on a kind of feasibility part, what is the best tech stack that you should be doing and what tools should we use? And so the developers were developing the Azure app, and we kind of set up the whole tech stack and then to help the startup to make it happen together. But at the same time, for a business, how do you make a business run? There's different expenses that need to happen. There's operating costs, there's HR fee, there's salary, and there are many, many other things that need to be considered. And this is one part of making the business run. So I hope I'm explaining it clearly. If you have any question, I'll be happy to answer them as well. But what I'm trying to say is that there are many different sets of tools, but it's the same process. Because the 4 steps that we just went through, from a very design point of view or a very business design point of view, like it's a rinse and repeat process. It's something that we do, and it's like it gives us context, and then that we kind of, you don't always just say, this is the design, this is it. You kind of go around and keep doing it. So this is quite an interesting experience because when I was doing the project, I think this is one of the learning that I had was when I was trying to explain this to the designers, to the developers of why I do the things I do, is that it basically follows the same process that every designer will follow. It is the same thing. I'm just using different tools and I'm looking at a different context. So basically, this is the non-Excel version of things. We built an overall plan of a 4-year plan. So it's quite normal for a startup to have a 4-year plan. This is quite a rough plan, by the way. So the idea is that there will be services that is built for users. There will be services that is built for musicians. Once we have musicians as a user base as well, we look at the product, we look at the operation, we look at the financial, and we look at the KPIs of how to measure them. And this is just an overview. So for example, the product is based on the different feature and the different parts of the product that we need to launch, that we plan on launching. Operation is more about the kind of people that we need to hire, the people that are required to make it run. It's quite a funny thing to say because a lot of times the client was telling me, it's like, why do we need to hire a community manager? I'm like, because you're gonna have thousands and thousands of users commenting and writing things and contacting you when your app breaks. Who is gonna reply the email? Like, you need people to do that. It's quite simple. It sounds very simple, like I'm going to put a feedback form in my app, but there's gonna be people who have to do that. It's not just a feature you put in. So when we put in a feature, we have to consider how it's actually gonna be operated. And then we look at the financial about the kind of projection of what we're looking for and then the kind of numbers that we're looking at, how well the business is making money. I'll go into detail about that in a bit. And the different KPIs, there are other KPIs I use, but the ones I pull out is like the amount of users. It basically gives us an indication. So it's a user-centric business. And I think any business these days should be user-centric. And based on the amount of users and active users, you should be able to know how well your business is performing. So the original goal that I shared with you was I said monetization will be turned on by a year later, and then during that time we're going to grow user base. I'm going to tell you how we got to that, not in the exact order because it's a very iterative process. So we look at the primary user and then we look at the revenue streams. And then that based on the growth of the primary user, I can understand how much revenue that there might be, which makes a lot of sense. And then I needed to build in a secondary user, which is the musician, because there's a complex value chain that allows the musicians to gain value from the service as well. And based on the secondary user, I'm able to scale the revenue by and adding more value. So then the revenue actually go up, and also at the same time, there's also some stop of doing internalization, so expanding to other country. So then that knowing that a specific revenue model works, and then to be able to scale it. And then we look at the primary and secondary user, and then we look at the average revenue per user. So this is a very specific startup term about basically how much money am I making out of each one of these users. So this is average revenue per user for the primary user, and this is the average revenue per user for the secondary user. So it's actually very interesting because the number of secondary users are so much less than the primary user, and it also has a slower growth. And it never actually goes more than the end users. But we're actually making more money out of them than the actual end users, which is weird, right? It sounds very weird, but this is what numbers give you. And also we look at the cost, the customer acquisition cost. So it costs a lot of money to acquire the end users, but it costs a lot less for secondary users. So it's quite interesting as well to see that. So then that's why we decided to focus the product more on the product geared towards musician. But to be able to provide the value for musician, we need to build enough user base for the musician to think that this is worthwhile. And we look at the revenue, we look at the headcount, we look at the operation, and we know that we have to ramp up the team for new features. We have to hire more operational staff, an international team. We also know that we are not making enough for the business. So we have the cash in the bank, it dipped below zero at some point. So this gives us an indication of when we actually have to raise funds for the company so that the company can keep operating, so that we don't have a negative amount, which makes sense. This is how you plan a business, really. And really, it's a very balancing act between kind of understanding the product, the operation, and the financial, and you have a strategy that kind of drives through everything. And these are the 4 things that I consider when I try to build a startup business. And in the end, I think we had a better service because I developed new revenue streams that is not in the original plan, and then that is kind of more inventive. There's more value provided by user, different kind of user, and also it's a self-sustaining service after the 2nd year. So I think it's a good business and it's a good service. So that's it. Thank you.
Kathy, we have a present for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to introduce. First of all, thank you very much for your valuable presentation. Let me give this one.
Oh, gee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.